Hello my friends, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to build layered textures and to fix one of the greatest complaints about Poser since Bondware took over. Now, Bondware has been good for Poser, but one of the things that they did was upgraded from Python 2 to Python 3. That's the scripting language that's built in. One of the things that it did was broke absolutely loads and loads of content issues, content, like products. So this is a common one. This is called one-click wounds, and what it enables you to do is to double-click to add these wounds to your Generation 4 figures, so Michael 4, Victoria 4, Hero 4, Freak 4, the Girl 4, and you double-click and then it adds these wounds over the top and it blends them in so that whatever the skin texture you've got, those wounds will be added to it. And unfortunately, it uses Python to do so. So I'll give you an example. So say I want to add this broken nose to this Michael 4. I double click it and you get that error message with a bad magic number. Now, we could try to error check Python and work out how to rewrite it, but that is a huge problem. So instead, what I'm going to do is show you how to add those layers manually, which is a much quicker way of doing it. So the first thing that we need to do is to install the product. If you you bought your product from DAZ 3D, and this is how it comes nowadays, which is this zip file. The zip file, if it's an older product, it will come as an executable, which they used to do way back in the day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open this zip file, and then inside there, DAZ have got this content folder, which is a really annoying way of doing things for Poser. Then you have to open that, and inside is the runtime, and that's everything that you need for Poser is inside that runtime. So we double click inside there, and there's three folders. There's the library folder, which gives us that gives us these nice clickable icons that will apply the effect, or at least it used to do. There's a Python folder, which is the Python scripts that those library images connect to. And then the most important thing is the textures folder. So I double click on the textures. That tells me that the textures are in a subfolder called Dragonstorm with two A's. And then inside that, one-click wounds, and then there's the wounds inside. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to select this face. I'm going to apply a deep cut to the cheek. So I go to the material room. Then I click on the head to make sure that the face is selected. And I'm just going to arrange these so that it's easier to see what's going on. So we've got three nodes connected here. It's a very simple texture. Some others will be a lot more complicated, but this is the node that you need to do the work on. So here's the skin texture, the color texture. It could be with some textures that they'd be plugged into alt diffuse instead, but it's the texture that gives it the color that you need to do the mixing. This will work either way. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new node, math, color math. And then so that's going to be our mix node. Then we're going to do another new node, 2D textures, image map. This is going to be the map that I blend the texture with. So I go to image source, and I know that it's in this folder in runtime called textures, Dragonstorm with two A's. Dragonstorm with two A's, and inside there is one-click wounds. You'll see this content creator has created a lot of different add-on things like this. So I go into one-click wounds, and what I'm looking for is faces cut. So faces cut. So I do cut, and there's a little cut image there. And now what I want to do is I want to blend this with this image. So the way it's going to work is everything that's white will turn to invisible, and then the color will blend on top. So I drag this output from this to the input of the color math. Then I drag the output from the color texture to the input. Change this color to white. So that's the background color. And I changed the mix node to multiply. And you'll see here now, here's the color thing with this the scar on, the cut. And I just drag that into diffuse color. And now when I render that, I get the scar on top. And that works also in Firefly as well. I'm rendering in Superfly, but it works fine in Firefly. And there's one more thing that I want to add here. So I select the head, and that is a displacement node. Now, with Superfly, that can be a problem. I'll explain why in a second. So I add a new image map. Then I click on the source, and I'm going to do face cut. Where's face cut, face cut, face cut D for displacement. And displacement is going to give me some depth on the image. So I drag that onto displacement, and by default this is going to be 0.083333 there. So let's just give that a render and see what that does. So that's supposed to be making this stick out a bit more. Not really doing a great job of it at the moment. Maybe I did something wrong. Let me just go and double check. Face is cut displacement, so that's the right name. Face is cut, yes, that's the right name for that file, and it's plugged into displacement. So here's probably the problem. So I'm going to click on this, and this is the file I want. So I'm going to click browse, and it's going to pick up the path to that displacement map, and then I'm going to take the path from here, and I'm going to go into my image editor, which in this case is going to be Photoshop, and then I'm going to do open, and I'm going to click that path up here, which in this case is already selected, and I'm going to find faces cut D for displacement. Okay, so here's the displacement image. As you can see, it's very, very subtle. So what I need to do in Photoshop is make sure that I have my info pane open, which is over here. And you'll see that this displacement is barely doing displacement at all. So remember, where it's black, it does nothing. Where it's white, it does a lot. So there's no whiteness on here at all. So what I could do is add a levels adjustment layer and then increase the brightness of that to make that a stronger effect like that. The alternative way to achieve the same effect would be simply to turn my displacement level up. So I'll times it by 10 by getting rid of that 0, and let's see if that works. There's a reason to do each on different occasions, but you'll see what. So that's now brought this kind of, it's displaced a little bit too far here. Now, one of the problems here with displacing in Superfly, if I go to Firefly and render that displacement will probably be very, very pronounced. Let's have a little look. And that displacement there is quite pronounced. So we know that the displacement is working properly in Firefly, but in Superfly, there's another issue. I've talked about it many times. If I go to this hidden line view, so it displays this image in hidden line, you'll see the polygons that create the face here. And there's not an awful lot of detail. Now, that doesn't matter for changing the shape of the face, for doing morphs, for smiles and expressions and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to doing displacement, Superfly uses what's known as polygon displacement, which means that it can only displace where there's a polygon, whereas Firefly, the previous poser rendering engine, used what was known as micro facet or micro surface displacement. So the displacement was not dependent upon the resolution of the mesh, whereas with Superfly, the mesh resolution affects the resolution of the displacement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the resolution of this mesh. So one way to do it is to go into properties, and then I want to subdivide. Now, annoyingly, on this one, I can only subdivide the entire model, which is really going to slow things down. So I go to figure, skinning method, make sure that's set to unimesh, and now I'm going to subdivide this to 2 levels. 1, and you see the number of polygons increases. And okay, so it's saying I'm going to get a very high polygon count by doing that to 2. It's also going to slow things down a lot. I tell you what, I'll just leave that on 1 for now, and then we'll render that again in Superfly, and let's see if that gives us a slightly better result. So let's change that back to Superfly and render. And the displacement is too high, but the amount of polygon detail is still not high enough. So let's increase that to 1 more. Unfortunately, the whole model is now going to be super high resolution, and let's give that 1 more try. Okay, there's not a significant difference there, I must admit. So I'm just going to take that back down to 0. And I would probably just return to Photoshop and increase the levels of this so that it's stronger color there. Now, why is the image here, let's go back to our color display, why is it giving us this kind of noise here? Well, if we look at our displacement map, it appears to be black here, kind of shade of grey here, and mostly black here. But and we can check that. I've got the eyedropper tool, which I selected here. Over here is the info panel, and what you want to see is this RGB here, the values. As I move the eyedropper, it will show the values of the red, green, and blue colours values underneath the cursor. So you'll see here they're all 0, 0, 0. So that means that the level of each one is 0, and 3 zeros is equivalent to black. 3 times 255 is equivalent to white, unless you're working in 32 or 64-bit color. So even over here, where it appears to be almost black, there's actually still a bit of shade. You can see that's like 16, 10, 8, whatever, you know. And when you displace in Poser, it picks up those levels and still uses it as a displacement value. So what you need to do is decrease the level of displacement enough to get rid of that, or you need to clean up the map so that there's none of that kind of almost black stuff out here. You will lose the subtlety of the displacement, but that may be the price you pay. So let's try. Click on the head again. Let's try reducing the displacement map back down to 0.2. Also, of course, whenever you're doing displacement, another thing that makes a huge difference is the lighting. So although this is displaced, the displacement and the basically displacement is like sculpting the surface, you could think of, and that depends upon the reflections of highlights and shadow on the surface. So if there's not many highlights and shadows, then the displacement doesn't show as clearly. So let's do that again. So we've mostly got rid of those, but the displacement's not super obvious. But you'll see at least that we did manage to blend the scar. Now I'm going to show you a different way of doing this, and I'll explain why. So at the moment, what we've done is we've added this color math node here. Let me get rid of that scar preview. We've blended the 2 colors, overlaying this scar using white as a transparency, using the multiply mode to make that happen. Generally speaking, if I wanted to get transparency in an image, I'd use the transparency plugin here, set to 1, and then I'd create a transparency map, which is a black and white map or grayscale map to define levels of transparency on my image. So where it's completely black on my transparency map would be completely transparent, where it's white would be completely opaque, and grey would be shades in between. But I'm not sure that this method, you can use grayscale to define the transparency of this map. So as I say, this is using white to create transparency using the multiply node, but I'm not sure if grey will give you semi-transparent when mixing like this. So I'm going to show you another way of doing it as well, and there are other benefits to doing it this way. So I'm going to select them, and I'm going to plug this back into my diffuse node. So we're back to where we were, the original skin texture, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to use layers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the plus button here to add a layer, and you'll see there's a layer navigator here. I don't know why they added that, because you might as well just click on this and then go to layer 1. So this is the top layer. So think of it like a stack of papers. If you had a stack of papers, you can only see the top paper, and the ones underneath are hidden by the top one. But if you imagine that parts of the paper is transparent, as controlled by this transparency value here and a transparency map, then you can see through to the layers underneath. So it's quite a powerful way of blending layers. So imagine, excuse me, so imagine that you are putting a tattoo on the face, or we're putting dirt, or we're putting blood on the face, or whatever. We can use this method to blend layers together in quite a powerful way, and in fact we can have multiple layers. Now you'll see by default the diffuse color is blue. I think that's just Bondware's way of reminding you that there's a layer above, because if I render this here, or I could press Ctrl R, which I will do in future when I say render, you'll see that this is blue because this top layer is overriding the layers underneath at the moment. Also, something else that you need to remember, especially when the transparency starts kicking in, that the specularity multiplies from the layer below, and the top layer has precedence again. So this specularity, I'm going to set this to 0 because we can start to get quite nasty things happening when you get unpredictable things when you've got a lot of specularity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this diffuse color base color to white. So that means now that the diffuse is not going to be interfering with what I'm going to put on top of it. And now I'm going to do what I did before, and I'm going to create a node here. And this is going to be my my wound node. So what was it called? It was called face cut here. And at the moment, if I render this white color, this node here will just completely override the skin color underneath. So how do you think that I get rid of that? I create a transparency map, of course. Now, the problem is, if I go to the folder here, you'll see that this creator has created a faces cut displacement and a faces cut. Now this transparency map, I created that. All of the others don't have transparency maps. So this product just had a displacement map and a color map. So how would we create a transparency map? Well, we're going to copy this path. We're going to go into Photoshop or your image editor of choice, and we're going to open that color map. So we want faces cut. And now what we need to do is to turn this colored image into a transparency map. So how do we do that? Well, it's nice and easy. The first thing we have to do is convert it into a grayscale image, black and white, but it's actually grayscale, like a grayscale photograph. You could do that by going up to edit and image adjustments and choosing black and white there, but I prefer to do it using an adjustment layer, which gives you more control. And I click this adjustment layer down here in Photoshop and then choose black and white. And why this gives you more control is because it's what's known as a parametric adjustment layer. So you see that's converted it to black and white, but I can use these sliders to convert to affect the way that different shades within the image convert to black and white. So for example, this one that picks up the reds, is currently at 40, but if I turn that down a long way, now that's going to become a much more pronounced effect, and so on. So I'm going to just leave that at 40 for now. And I'm going to flatten this, and you'll see why in a second. So I've converted that to black and white. And as I say, we could have used that parametric thing to edit the way it did that a lot more. And then I'm going to save that. So I've actually got one that's already saved. And oops, daisy. I'm going to create a new node, image map, and this is going to be my transparency map. So for transparency maps to work, I need to set the transparency value to 1, which means 100% application of the transparency map. It doesn't mean 100% transparency across the entire map. The actual level of transparency will still be controlled by the map, but it does activate the map, as it were. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to transparency map, choose this cut layer, and I'm going to apply that as a transparency map. And now when I render that, Control R, you'll see that it goes transparent-ish, except for where the cut is. And it's overly specular, so I'm going to turn the specular down to 0 for now, because what we're getting is a differential between the specularity of the head and the neck, so it looks weird. So Control R to render again, and that's a lot better now. You'll see here an issue that we have with the transparency is not perfect on this scar, and there could be two reasons for that. One, as I say, the transparency map might not be so good, or the other could be, oops, I've clicked render, my mistake, that the render quality is not high enough. So first thing, before I start messing about with my map trying to fix a problem that might not exist, I just turn it up to high level and render that again. That's going to take a little bit longer. No, so that's still the issue here is that the area around the scar is a little bit too white. So here's what I would do here. I'd go into my, and also, sorry, I missed a step when I created this map. What I need to do is Control I to turn it into an inversion, a reversed colors. So this is actually my transparency map. So if you recall, everything that's black becomes transparent, everything that's white becomes opaque or visible, and then I'm going to save that. Now I've actually, for the sake of this image, I'm using a map that I've saved here that I created earlier. So if I go back to my transparency map, you recall I mentioned that we've got, using the RGB here, I've got black out here, kind of white in here, but it's these grey bits that you can't see that are creating that kind of whiteness on the edge of the image. So what I would do is I would add a layer adjustment, levels adjustment layer. Again, don't do it up here in the image adjustment. Use an adjustment layer because it's parametric. And one of the great things about Poser is that you can actually use Photoshop images as part of your building process. So I've created levels. Now here's the levels dialog. This is why it's parametric, because I can continue to edit this. Had I just apply the levels using the levels up here in image adjustment levels, what it does is it applies it, but it doesn't give me a way to go back and adjust it while I try and figure out the perfect balance. And let me show you why that's a really bad thing. Okay, I'll get rid of this levels adjustment layer here, Control Z to undo, and I'll do layer adjustment here, and I'll do levels, and now you can see levels has popped up here. I'll just move this layer up here, change it to that. Now if I save that, that is hard coded into this image. So what I've done is I've actually lost detail permanently in the white. So now if I go back in here and do levels again, and I want to I want to bring this back down, I can't go any lower in the white to return the detail that I lost. I'm just going to Control Z. See all that detail that I lost there on the scar. Whereas if I do it this way, using levels as a adjustment layer, this remains live in the image forever. So what do I mean by live? I mean, if I save this image as a Photoshop image, this adjustment layer will always be there, so I can always play with this value and find what I'm looking for. So what this levels histogram shows you is the distribution of shades within the image, from blackest at this end to whitest at this end. So this end is white, this end is black. And by adjusting them, so if I move this towards the middle, it makes the image blacker. If I move this towards the middle, it makes the image whiter. And this is the midpoint that adjusts proportionately. So if I go here, the midpoint stays midway between them, and I can also manually adjust the midpoint as well. So I'm just going to undo that. So what I want to do is I want to slide the white point up to make the white a bit more pronounced, because you remember that when I had the image earlier, this was not making a strong enough effect. So I'm going to go up to here, and then I would save that. Now, this image actually has too much white there. So in that particular case, or it's the image has displaced too much. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my words. The transparency is not transparent enough. So I need this to be blacker. Well, I want more transparent and more transparency. I want the image to be blacker. So what I need to do is to find a level where that's nice and black, or I could just manually just draw black on that, although it wouldn't look very organic. And then I save that. And now, if I go into my image here, and that is a process that you'll have to iterate over a number of, back and forwards. The great thing is you can adjust Photoshop, save Photoshop, then come in here and do a render, go back to Photoshop, make a change and save, come back and do a render without having to do a lot of additional setup. So I'm now going to choose my transparency map. Here's one that I've actually saved earlier, and it's here. And hopefully this transparency map, if I can find it, should give me a more pleasing result. So let's give that a render. And you'll see now that we haven't got that white around the edge. So I boosted the brightness a bit, but not too much. We've got a nice clean transparency map. So now all that remains is to add the displacement map again, and we're good to go. So there's two ways of mixing levels together. The second one is more artful but more work, but it also lets you use full grayscale transparency maps. The first one, I'm not sure if you can actually add grayscale transparency maps. I probably should have checked before I made this video, but there is definitely a benefit to the layered approach, because you can add layers and layers and layers and layers. You could add like material layers and rag and cloth and all that sort of stuff. Let me show you one more situation. Where that's going to become really, really apparent. So I'm going to go back to this layer, and instead of this faces scar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a blood layer. So this character has been in a fight, and I'm going to do, he's got a product called Grunge. I'm going to do a blood shader, and what I'm looking for is this runny blood, and it's going to show you two nice little things here. And I'm going to change transparency to the same. So okay, just need to pick up that path. Easiest way this time is to pick up the path from this. Excuse me, burping, rude. And I'm going to add the path to here. Runny blood, so we've got a displacement layer and a transparency map. I don't know why he's got the suffix M, but anyway, that's what it is. And now when I run that, he's going to have his face covered in blood. And this is where it's so important. See this red here, this blood's very, very dark. This blood is not so dark. Now, the level of darkness could be controlled by the transparency map. And if we go to Photoshop, you'll almost certainly see that transparency map has levels of grey in it. Let's go Dragonstorm, Grunge, Blood, and the transparency map for Runny is here. And you can see there's levels of grey shade there. Actually, I think he's done the colours just with the colour map. Right, but here's a useful thing. Let me just zoom out on this image just a little bit. What you'll see is when I render this, Control R, there's a sharp cutoff between the face and on the lips here. And this is a really cool thing. If I go into the face map, choose the correct layer, copy that, Control C, or in this case, probably just use copy there. Now I'm going to pick up the lips, or I could just choose lip from this list here. And I'm going to add a layer here as well. Select the surface and just do replace. And now, because this is just a map that goes on top that is not position dependent. Now, obviously, if I had a face tattoo here, that has to match up with the texture of the face. So I can't just start removing that tattoo somewhere else and expect it to look good. But in this particular case, this map is going to match up to the map on the top of the face. So you'll recall it's like this before. Now I've added that exact same map to the lips as well. And you'll see that that map continues through as if it's been UV mapped for the whole face. That's just a nice little feature. I think that kind of goes over it, guys. Hopefully you found something of value. I will... Actually, I'm just going to tell you one more little tiny trick. I can never stop, can I? Right, so I go into the face, go into the second layer. This time I'm going to add a dirt map. So I go into here, grunge, dirt shader. Now these shaders, the maps are not as good. I'm going to choose filthy. No, I'll do mud small. Okay. So I need the appropriate transparency map for mud small. So I go into dirt shader, mud small D, mud small M for map. Obviously I should be adding displacement maps as well. And I think that these are not going to cut out quite as cleanly. Oh, actually that was pretty good. Some of the ones don't look quite as good. But you'll see that this map, now if I take this map, pick up the face, go to the next layer, copy that, Control C. If I go to his torso, obviously that's a much larger area to apply this to, and I add a map here, and I'm in that layer, so I select the poser surface, right click, paste. So now I've added that map. I should have done replace, sorry, that would have deleted that base layer at the same time. Okay, so I've now got this dirt map, and animation is running for some reason. Right, accidentally press the enter key. Now if I go M for main camera, yours probably won't have shortcuts. That map quite possibly won't match up to the map in the top. Let's have a look. So this is a common problem. If you're going to use the same map for two different parts of the body, there's two different things that you need to worry about. The amount of area that the map will be spread over and the resolution of the area it's going to be, or of the UV map. So the UV map for the body, I think, is 4K map, whereas the resolution for the face is also 4K, but over a much smaller area. So you can think of this as being, the text has been spread over a balloon that's stretched much wider. So one possible solution, because you can see here that the map here looks too big relative to the map on the face. If this was splashes, you'd be asking why are the splashes not the same scale. So what you can do is to go into here and change the scale of the map. So if I go down in size, that decreases the map. So let's say 1/10 as large by going 0.1 in the U, that's X basically, 0.1. And now it's reduced that size by 90%. And I also have to do it with a transparency map. But you're going to see another problem appear here. And you'll see what. And this is kind of people try not to do this with tileable maps now, but in the day when this was created, they weren't really thinking about this. So if I render this, you'll see clear duplication patterns here. See where you got this really pronounced pattern that duplicates here, and you've got the kind of lines in between the patterns. And what you would try to do is to create a map that can be tiled without obvious tiling boundaries. Another way to solve that would be to, I remember seeing this on goodness me, it was a tutorial for Blender, but it works on anything, would be to create another layer, then do exactly the same thing on that other layer, but to offset it. Oh, didn't do replace, what an idiot. But to offset it slightly, so the boundary lines of each kind of interfere with the other boundary lines. So we do a offset in each axis by, say, 0.3. Doesn't really matter what I do it by, just as long as you don't do a whole number. And then I've got to do the same on the transparency map. And if I had displacement map, I'd have to do it there. And sometimes, now what I've got is two layers doing the same thing, but with their bounds offset to each other, and it can disguise the fact that you're doing that. So let's just zoom in a little bit and see if that's helped the situation. Of course, we've now got twice as much dirt on there as well. I didn't change the scale on the second one, but you will see that that has completely hidden the boundaries of the other displacement. So you know, I could reduce the scale now, but that actually works quite well, doesn't it? So I forgot to say that also messing about with the scale of a second layer. So there you go, guys. There's some nice tricks and tools for layering, and also a really great way to fix the problem with broken Python. I really hope you found that useful. I'm quite happy with this one. Recorded it 4 times. So there you go. You have a fantastic week, guys. Take care.